KIZUNA Indo-Japan Study Forum's monthly lecture. We have very eminent people on the panel. The speaker is Visakha Chowdhury from Amsterdam. Discussant is another eminent scholar, Professor Ranjana Mukhopadhyaya. And to chair this session, we have the privilege of having Professor Sushama Jain. Madam Chairperson, with your permission, may I say a few words about the forum? Most of you are familiar with what MOSAI means, Mongo Scholars Association of India. We are all alumni. Our members are all alumni, Japanese universities and research institutions. We started our operations in 1984. Essentially, first few years have been on promoting Japanese language studies in India, because 1984 there were just about 100 students learning the language. So that was the foundation. So we introduced Japanese language test, Japanese language speech contest, teaching of Japanese, and so on and so forth. For the last couple of years, the scholars felt that it's time to sort of look at studying the historical connections between India and Japan from a wider perspective. Of course, the well-known perspective is starting with Buddhism. Then over the years, normally we jump to the 18th and 19th century. So there's a huge gap. And to fill in the gap, we established this forum, KIZUNA India-Japan Study Forum. The trigger was a conference in 1986. 88, where we invited international scholars, 22, 23 of them, and we found that there are a large number of areas that need further research. Now, one of the reasons why we thought of this KIZUNA monthly forum is that we wish to encourage many more younger people in India for a broader perspective. The usual trend, political relations, philosophical relations, and lately strategic relations. But the wider perspective of cultural, normally in terminology of bilateral discussions, has come down to mean people-to-people contact. The people-to-people contact can be interpreted in many ways, necessarily scholarly way. So today's lecture, therefore, is in the series where we want younger scholars to share a wider perspective of Indo-Japan cultural relations. And that is where today's lecture becomes very important. Animating mythologies, hybridity, and adaptation in Ramayana. I think the chairperson would probably introduce the discussant and the speaker. I would simply mention that Professor Sushama Jain is professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Center for Japanese Studies. She has been Japan Foundation Fellow a number of times to Japan and has been a visiting professor to several universities and institutions. Amongst her many publications, I will simply mention two. One is comparative study of Japanese and Hindi grammar, and the other is Japan, the living culture. Without taking more time, may I now request Professor Sushama to please conduct. Let me welcome all of you to this session. I can see that people are joining in. So for the latecomers, sorry, but we won't wait. We already have 18 people waiting to listen to the speaker and the discussions. Professor Sushama, please.
Thank you, Dr. Jain.
Sushma ji, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Jain. So I will begin with a brief introduction of Ms. Visakha Chowdhury. Visakha Chowdhury is currently pursuing her second master's degree in comparative cultural analysis and at the University of Amsterdam. She has completed her postgraduate degree in East Asian Studies from the University of Delhi and has a background in English literature. Her research interests include visual and material culture in East Asia and South Asia and their transnational perception and circulation. As Dr. Jain has already mentioned, the title of today's lecture is Animating Mythologies, Hybridity and Adaptation in Ramayana, Rama Ouji Densetsu, the legend of Prince Rama. The lecture will analyze, briefly I'll mention, the legacy of Japanese animation within Indian popular culture through the Indo-Japanese animated film Ramayana, the legend of Prince Ram, the adaptational space created through this collaborative venture will be examined through a detailed study of the film's amalgamated animation style and aesthetics. Furthermore, this paper will posit the cultural exchange and hybridity engendered through this venture as a model for future Indo-Japanese cultural collaborations. Very interesting topic, and this abstract. Visakha-san, over to you. You can take, say, about 20 to 25 minutes will be enough.
Yeah.
So, right, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am, for such a generous introduction. I would like to share my screen now so that I have a presentation to share as well. So I'll share that screen, and please let me know if it is visible. Is my screen visible now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right. So I will just
Visakha, could you make it
begin now.
full screen? Could you make,
Yeah. Okay. Yes, I will begin now. So when I received the opportunity to present some of my work through the KIZUNA India-Japan Study Forum, I began to deliberate on how I would be approaching interconnections between India and Japan. That is when I began to think on the lines of my own first interactions with Japan. For me, as a massive consumer of digital and visual content, my first interaction with Japan was through the visual cultures of the country. Therefore, I began to think about some of my first engagements with Japanese visual media. Some famous and long-running children's TV programs came to mind, but then I remembered a discussion with my peers in college about some of the most impactful visual media from our childhoods. And Ramayana, Rama Ouji Densetsu, had featured heavily in that conversation. We knew the film by the name of the legend of Lord Ram, and it was only through a Google search at the age of 19 or 20 that my peers and I found out that one of the core memories of film and media for our entire generation had been a Japanese production. Therefore, Japan, through its techniques of animation and visuality, had been memorialized within my psyche even before I had become aware of it. And it is because of this that I chose this film as the cultural object through which I looked into Indo-Japanese cultural collaboration. Yugo Sago's Ramayana, Rama Oji Densetsu, as a massive collaborative venture was seminal, not only in its scope, style, and imagination, but also for the popularization of the genre of mythology in animation within the country. Furthermore, the importance of this film also lies in the model for Indo-Japanese cultural co-creation it laid down and the form of adaptation it espoused. It expanded the potential of animated media within India and created an engaging pathway for introducing an important aspect of Indian cultural memory to Japan through striking visuals and elegant narration. Therefore, this film, as a hybrid Indo-Japanese cultural product, provides for interesting insights into an understated yet significant interconnection between India and Japan, whereby Japanese legacies of animation were memorialized within Indian cultural imaginaries. The immense popularity of this film amongst individuals in both Japan and India, as witnessed from the still active website of the film, as well as its active social media pages, reveals its enduring impact on the cultural memory of both nations, making this analysis a relevant foray into Indo-Japanese cultural relations. Thus, within this paper that I prepared for this presentation, I begin with a foray into the contextual background of the film, followed by an analysis of its cultural and stylistic hybridity, and conclude by positing this film as a model for future Indo-Japanese cultural collaborations. The production for Ramayana, Rama Oji Densetsu began in 1984, and the film was released in 1993, revealing a production period spanning over 9 years. Yuko Sago, in his time as a documentary maker, was working on the documentary The Ramayana Relics in 1983, which looked at the excavation conducted by Indian archaeologist Dr. B.B. Lal near Allahabad. It was through this venture that the director was exposed to the story of Ramayana. Despite opposition from members of the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, the director made plans to move forward with a joint Indo-Japanese production with a view to maintain the narrative authenticity of the epic. However, while anime as a genre in Japan was and continues to be an elevated art form informed by serious themes, complex plot lines, and critical approaches, anime as a concept was still considered as a children's genre in India and was associated with triviality and lack of sophistication. The idea of representing an epic as deeply rooted in the cultural and socio-religious fabric of the Ramayana, socio-religious fabric of the subcontinent as the Ramayana, through an artistic form which was viewed as childish, was therefore perceived by the Indian government as an endeavor fraught with peril at the time. Furthermore, the period within which the production of this film unfolded coincided with a period of deep communal conflict in the country, and therefore the production of an animated film on an issue so charged with political and communal tension was a decision that was determined to be politically unsound. As a consequence, India withdrew itself from the possibility of a joint production, and Rama Oji Densetsu came up as a solely Japanese production. However, despite such issues, Sako's commitment to co-creation ensured that the film continued to have vast amounts of input from Indian artists and animators. He insisted that Indian animator Rav Mohan co-direct the film with him and supervise it as well in order to maintain the authenticity of the epic. In an online interview, Ram Mohan put forth that he had to make several visits to Tokyo in order to work on the film. As a supervisor of the designs, gestures, and performances within the film, he ensured that certain aspects of the visuals, especially those which contained cultural nuances, were portrayed accurately. For instance, as the dhoti as a garment was not familiar to Japanese animators, Mohan ensured that an individual gave them a demonstration of draping a dhoti so that the artists could accurately render the same within the film. The Indian side was in charge of the scenario, art settings, dialogue, recording, music, etc., while the Japanese side was in charge of the storyboards, background, original drawings, animation, coloring, photography, and editing. On the Indian side, prominent writers, music directors, artists, and film actors of the day participated, while on the Japanese side, a total of 450 people, including animators who were also active in Hayao Miyazaki's works, worked to create more than 100,000 hand-drawn celluloid pictures for this film. It was completed in December 1992 after the investment of approximately 800 million yen. While it could not be released in India due to the sensitive nature of its content, it had a Japanese and international release. However, the film became extremely popular in India post its screening on DD National in the early 2000s and the boom in its VCR and DVD sales, most importantly due to its screening by Cartoon Network at that time, especially around Diwali and Dashera. Therefore, despite the uncertain and long-run production time, the film etched itself onto the fabric of Indo-Japanese cultural relations, as can be seen from the digitally remastered 4K version of the film being screened in Tokyo in 2022, after almost 30 years of its first release. We will now move on to the amalgamated animation style and aesthetics of the film. The Hollywood version of the film, which was released in the US by Krishna Shah and starred famous actor Bryan Cranston in the role of Ram, won the Best Animation Film of the Year at the 2000 Santa Clarita International Film Festival in the United States. However, reviews of this version were often not favorable, as can be seen from this excerpt. While the comment regarding the background illustration is questionable, the English dubbed versions of the film did seem to lack, especially in terms of dialogue and transitions. It is because of this reason that we consider the Hindi dubbed version of this film. A host of experienced actors like Shatrughan Sinha were chosen to voice the Hindi version of the film. Most importantly, Arun Govil, who played Ram in the cult classic Ramayana by Ramanand Sagar, was also chosen to voice Ram in the Hindi dub of the animated film, paying homage to the immense popularity of the same. A large part of the success of Ramanand Sagar's Ramayana was owed to its powerful and authentic dialogue writing by Sagar himself. Rama Ouji Densetsu's Hindi dub follows from the dialogic legacy of the aforementioned, using similar language, but simplifying the complexity of the content, thus making it more accessible for younger audiences. This can be seen from some of the songs within the film as well, which, while being made in Sanskrit in the original version, were translated to Hindi within this version, making them more relatable and meaningful to larger sections of people, as well as making the transition from dialogue to songs much more smooth. Thus, this version of the film truly brings out its stylistic hybridity with classic and familiar dialogue delivery in the vein of popular Indian mythology shows, and with a background score created in partnership by Vanraj Bhatia and Masashi Aoki, which incorporates classical instrumental music like the flute without falling into the pitfalls of stereotypical Hollywood Indian music. Within the visuals, the hybridity of cultures can be witnessed through the main character design following aesthetics, clothing styles, and postures reminiscent of Raja Ravi Verma's modernist depictions of gods and goddesses adapted in anime style character design. At the same time, the background design, as well as designs of certain side characters, utilize nature depictions and ecological ethos inspired from the vision of Hayao Miyazaki in conjunction with landscape imagery from India. The inspiration from Miyazaki manifests in the realistic, if impressionistic way in which the wind moves through the fields of grass and in the way in which first few drops of the rain in a shower darken patches on a pathway. As animators from this film had worked with Miyazaki earlier, Miyazaki's zoomorphism, as well as the influence of Gaia theory on his works, is often reflected in conjunction with Sako's interest in Hinduism within this film. Zoomorphism is particularly visible within the film in the depiction of the Asura or non-human characters, as you all can see, rather than the more common anthropomorphic depictions of specific characters, as done within either Ravi Verma paintings or Amar Chitrakatha illustrations. The film adopts more animalistic features in the designs of such characters. In addition, the Gaia theory also becomes apparent within the film. Within the Gaia theory, Gaia is seen as a complex interacting system, a single organism where all living things have a regulatory effect on how the Earth's environment promotes life. This is seen in one of the first scenes of the film, in which the demoness Taraka's presence pollutes a sacred forest, as well as in the scene with a cursed forest spirit named Kaband. And these scenes bear striking visual similarity to the scene in Princess Mononoke, in which Ashitaka is being chased by the cursed forest spirit. The theory's focus on the ability of nature to heal itself is also visible within the film. Taraka's death revives the forest, and Ravana's death also leads to the battleground erupting in Flora. Furthermore, the deaths of asuras or forest spirits within the film, like that of Taraka, Kaband, and even Ravan, end with them either becoming a part of the earth again or being released into the ether, revealing glimpses of Shinto animism as well as Buddhist transmigration. Yet another instance of stylistic and cultural hybridity can be seen within the film in the moments post the marriage of Rama and Sita. Upon their return to Ayodhya, people are shown as cheering, and the architectural styles shown are deeply inspired from Indian historical and mythological constructions. Yet the flowers which are showered upon them resemble the floating petals of the sakura, Japanese cherry blossom, connecting notions of love and fruition associated with the flowers to the specific atmosphere within the scene, which is a trope quite familiar to anime. It can be argued that the culturally hybrid form that this film takes is marred by the losses that are typical to the process of cultural change and interaction. For instance, the straightforward story and pacing of the film can be seen as diluting the richness and complexity of the Ramayana and the need to adhere to the sensitivity of the Indian masses, and the resultant flatness of the storyline can be seen as an underutilization of the zeitgeist and criticality found within the genre of anime. However, as a product of hybridity, the film can be understood as an epitome of Indo-Japanese co-creation and a tremendous example of positive intellectual, cultural, and informational exchange through which an adaptive space of mutual respect and appreciation was fostered. Rama Ouji Densetsu Rama Ouji Densetsu pioneered a significant and impactful means of Indo-Japanese collaboration and also laid down the practical basis for such co-creation, especially in the realm of multimodal narratives, that is, works which involve striking visuals, music, and movement, and engagement over a variety of linguistic, visual, auditory, gestural, and spatial modes. Therefore, the film stands as a successful and lasting example of Indo-Japanese cultural cooperation. In particular, the ethos of the film, in which mutual respect and inquisitiveness provided for the perfect grounds for a successful imaginative exercise, can serve as a model for future collaborative cultural exercises between India and Japan. The success and memorability of Rama Ouji Densetsu can be viewed as the perfect footing within Indo-Japanese collaborative efforts to move towards greater experimentation in the form, content, and style of narratives produced through co-creation, especially within an era in which global visual production is becoming increasingly accessible to the public. And audiences demand story-rich content in which they navigate unfamiliar genres, specialized discourse, and different combinations and arrangements of media. Partnership through collaborative ventures in visual media can be an innovative and relevant method of fostering deeper intercultural connections between India and Japan. Furthermore, Rama Ouji Densetsu, as mentioned earlier in this paper, also became one of the first visual interactions for an entire generation of youth with the epic itself, signaling the educational potential of such collaborative exercises. Thus, this film can be treated as a successful foundation for further forms of Indo-Japanese cultural co-creation, focusing on education and youth involvement. The creation of multimodal works which involve contextualizing and critically interrogating ideas from multiple perspectives, as well as exhort the youth to engage with their own heritage and that of other cultures in a sensitive and communicative fashion can prove to be a fruitful direction to move in for strengthening the future of Indo-Japanese cultural ties. References to India and mythologies from the country have made their way into anime during and after the production and popularity of Rama Ouji Densetsu, such as the reference to Arjun from the Mahabharata in Earth Maiden Arjun, to the concept of Rakshas and the Kushan clan of Western India in Berserk, and the depiction of Varanasi in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Therefore, continuing on this legacy in more collaborative ways, as was the case in Ramoji Densetsu, may allow for the creation of more innovative and thought-provoking narratives through the form of anime, which explores, amalgamates, and transforms historical ties and mutual cultural interest between the two nations in ways that build on the centuries-long heritage of cultural exchange between India and Japan. Furthermore, the designation of 2022 as the Japan Southwest Asia Exchange Year, as well as the 4K remastered version of the film being released in the same year and being screened at film festivals in Kanazawa, Mumbai, and California, reveals the opportunities as well as impetus towards future cooperation and partnership at present. Therefore, the legacy of Rama Ouji Densetsu can be instrumentalized to forge the future of Indo-Japanese cultural cooperation in terms of the production of visual media steeped in the cultural background and heritage of both nations. Thus, Rama Ouji Densetsu can be understood as a pioneering effort within Indo-Japanese cultural, technological, and informational exchange and hybridity. Despite the long-drawn production as well as the numerous barriers that emerged during the process, the tenacity of the creators, in addition to their investment in the process of animating the Ramayana, allowed for the creation of a hybrid Ramayana that made its space within Indian popular culture and memory. The significance of this film also stems from the hybrid techniques and cultural references utilized, experimenting with the form while maintaining a simple and straightforward narrative. The anime style adaptation of Indian mythology, aesthetics, and epic narratives, as well as the incorporation of certain Japanese Shinto and Buddhist themes, provides for a unique watcher experience, as well as an example of effective exchange and cultural cooperation. Moreover, the film and its process, intentions, and techniques can be viewed as important tools for creating a blueprint of future Indo-Japanese collaborative visual production. Given the imperative and initiative shown by both nations to strengthen ties in a variety of fields at present and in the near future, Rama Ouji Densetsu's success and enduring nature can be viewed as an example of synergistic possibilities of both nations and be used to engender more such positive intercultural interaction, exchanges, and co-creation in coming times. And that is all from my side.
Unmute.
Thank you very much, Visakha-san, for a very engaging. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are. Yes.
Very engaging and educational speech. Really, your insights and expertise in the subject are very valuable. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you also enjoyed the experience presenting.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, this was my yes.
So
this was my first time presenting, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity.
You are most welcome. And next, I would first introduce our discussant, Professor Ranjana Mukhopadhyaya. Professor Ranjana Mukhopadhyaya is Professor of Japanese Studies in the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi. She has also taught at the Nagoya State University in Japan. She did her PhD in Religious Studies from the University of Tokyo. Her book, Engaged Buddhism in Japan, published in Tokyo, has won 2 academic awards in Japan. Ranjana Sensei, thank you for taking time and coming to discuss today's lecture. I invite you to initiate the discussion with your expert remarks and observations. You must have made many. About 10 minutes would be, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to you.
Am I audible? I
Yeah.
think I am. Thank you so much, Visakha, for the lovely presentations. And it's nice to see that you're engaging so well with this Japanese studies and particularly related to media studies and Japanese in Japan. And also, I'd like to thank Dr. Ashok Jain, Sushma Jain, and also Professor Sushila Narasimhan. I don't know if she's here, for giving me this opportunity to be a discussant in this for this wonderful paper. I think it's a very interesting paper in the sense like what came across to me throughout, like how Japanese were so during the production process, even pre-production process, they were quite conscious of the religious sensibility regarding Ramayana. And that actually came up to me very strongly because, you know, when we talk about this, any issues about intercultural relations or cultural transmissions, it is actually the place where it is going. They take up any cultural cultural item or cultural artifact as per their own situation and as per their own circumstances and thing. Like we have seen adaptation of Ramayana in Southeast Asia, like in Thailand, Cambodia, and elsewhere. Wherever you go, you find the temples. They call it Ramakin, and they have their old Ramayana paintings there, and the Ramas. And if you look at those Rams and Sitas and all the characters portrayed there, they're very much, they have a Thaiish face. They look like Thailand people, all that so typical Southeast Asian faces there. So, so what my, but if you look at this Ramayana, and also what you said that they got an Indian person, Ram Mohan, whose name was, to actually in the production process, because they were very, they wanted to be very sure about the authenticity and the correctness, rather than the authenticity, the correctness in the representation. In the garment representation, which you gave the example of, so they saw how a dhoti was being worn to actually paint a dhoti, and also the whole and also the facial features. To some extent, they try to be more like Indian faces, to the best of the thing. So it is in that sense, it is, if you look at this cultural transmission, or if you look at from the concept of hybridity, they've actually not tried to be as consciously, they've tried to avoid the hybridity part. And they have actually tried to promote a far more authentic representation of which Indians consider as authentic, I would say. Because if you remember, because why it is the problem is there is because I think, as you also mentioned in your paper, like a lot of these Indians like us of our generation, we grew up watching Raman and Sagar's Ramayana. And that was the first visual impression we got. As childhood, we read about Ramayana in Amachitra Katha. And that is actually another way where animated, so it is not that Indians were not aware of animated versions of mythological characters. We have seen Amachitra Kathas, which are very accurately actually done it. They've tried to portray Ramayana through animations, through cartoons. So it is very interesting, like VHP should actually be opposing it, thinking that cartoon would be a very trivial representation, or they would trivialize Ramayana. And probably it is how we actually look in India towards animation. And so from there, it is this whole choice of medium, which is very important. This whole choice of medium, like it is, of course, because animation is very important in Japan, but as it is a very well-developed industry, but which is not in India. So the whole choice of medium is one thing. Also the whole urge on the part of the producer to maintain the authenticity of the original Ramayana, or let me see what he perceived as origin. You know, because there are so many representations of Ramayana across India. Ramanand Sagar was also a very, I would say, a very, if I may use that, very North Indian representation of Ramayana. And if you look at Raja Ravi Verma's thing, where Hanuman is so very given prominence, or there's also South Indian representation, there's also an Eastern Indian representation of Ramayana. So we have as many Ramayans as many epic stories, and there are various representation of Ramayans. So it was basically the author subconsciously looking at a very as a Ramayan which was as it was acceptable to the Indian audience, which is very interesting because he was not, I think he should have made he would have made it, if had he not bothered, he would have made it for his own audience rather than being concerned about the Indian audience. But here, I get the impression from your paper is that he was also equally conscious of of how the Indians would actually take it. Probably because VHP had already raised certain issues about this production. So that is another. So this again brings us to the whole concept of hybridity, where the person who is trying to adapt or the culture which is trying to bring in a new culture, and that too, which is a sensitive religious story, given the time when the Ayodhya dispute was at its peak, and how they're trying to maintain the so-called authenticity of of these stories. Okay, and so one is my question to you would be like, what was this choice of animation and the need on the part of the producer to have this kind of a sensitivity? Why was he so sensitive? Was he because he was aiming right from the beginning, targeting the Indian audience? Because if you know, I don't know if you've watched Tezuka Osamu's Buddha. I think I would advise you to also watch that, because if you see traditionally Buddha, the story is an Indian story. But the thing is that Buddhism is so well established in Japan, and the story of Buddha is so well known there. So I mean, he talks about, he gives a very different twist to the whole thing. Like he's forced to go to the war, and then he says, no, I will not go to the war, and then he goes to becomes renounced. He renounces the world. So the whole idea is and he's done it because it's also based on a manga which was first published as a manga, and then it became an animation. So the story, he had the confidence because because it is their story also. You know, because I find, because for him, for Tezuka Osamu, making Buddha was not, he was making an Indian story. Although he gives the characters an Indian face and everything, the locale is Indian, but it is very much a part of their culture. But I think for this Yugo Sako, the issue was that Ramayana is not as much a part of their culture. So I think he somewhere is very conscious that he's taking in a foreign story and he's trying to make an animation of it. So the difference in that, I don't think Tezuka Osamu would have much bothered about Indian sensitivity the way I think Yugo Sako has been sensitive about it. So my question is also about this, whether I don't know how deep you know, in the production process, what was like, why I mean, did he actually aim at Indian audience to be so sensitive towards it? Or to a larger Indian diaspora, if he was going to US, he would probably feel that the Indian diaspora might object to it, which was not, because they experimented with that. So that is one thing. The second thing, of course, I would also look at this. I mean, I don't know if it could be a case of cultural hybridity. You spoke about cultural hybridity, but yes, there was as far of showering sakura flowers, or, you know, I mean, I would like to know more about the part where you feel that it was a hybrid, it was an amalgamation of the Indian story, of an Indian culture with something that was Japanese. If somewhere, actually from your discussion, I could not think. So my other thing is that in what sense it is becoming a hybrid. Also, you talked about the flatness of the story, which I think because they were, but you know, I think Ramayana is actually a very simple story. If you compare it with Mahabharata, you know, Mahabharata, multiple things, it goes over 3 or 4 generations. You know, if you don't know, if you start from the 3 actually main Mahabharata, from Bhishma Pitama to this Dhritarashtra, and then the Kaurav. So there's 3 generations. But Ramayana is actually a very straight story of Ram and Sita and their exile, and then their then fight with Ravan and coming back. So there's no generational depth which you find in actually in Mahabharata. So I don't know if you said future collaboration, if they were to make Mahabharata, that would be a massive work for them, and that to animate Mahabharata with so many complex stories and multiple stories. So it is there. So Mai is also the time of time. He's the storyline that he chose. That he didn't go to. He chose actually. Hugo chose a very straightforward storyline, which was already we are very familiar with. He didn't go to any of the regional diversions which are there.
Yeah.
So that is also, he was actually trying to be non-hybrid, I would say, stick to his own, the traditional line or the more popular storyline. And why was he did do that? That actually relates to my first question already, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think
Yes.
this was, all in all, it was a very well researched and very well presentation, and I really enjoyed reading it. I hope I had got this paper earlier. I would have taken time. I would have gone more of depth into it. Thank you so much. And
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes.
Visakha-san, you would like to respond to that?
Yes, ma'am. Also, thank you so much, ma'am, for all your comments and input. And the idea that you just put forth, that how hybrid was he trying to be, because he does follow a very straightforward storyline, like you just mentioned. Plus, during the way Yugo Sako came across the Ramayana was through when he started going to the archaeological and digs that were being organized by Dr. B.B. Lal, and that is when he came across the Ramayana, and he was really influenced by the story itself. And the reason why he decided to make the reason he wanted to know more about the Ramayana was because of his prior interests in Hinduism. And a really important story of Hinduism itself. That's how he perceived it. And when he started to make basically the movie, he was basically the complaints from the VHP that he faced was how much can he possibly know about the epic itself and its importance, given his positionality as a foreign national. And that, I think, deterred him from actually experimenting a lot with the storyline, or introducing, like you mentioned, any like a more Japanese elements, like you mentioned Osamu Tezuka's Buddha. Like it had elements of there was not a very Indian based focus on that. It was truly hybrid, like you felt. And the thing is, when he made it, so it kind of came from that focus that this film must be authentic, or what he perceived to be authentic, because he was not exactly, he did not have sort of an cultural ownership or like of that sort of the Ramayana itself. I think hybridity in this case is mainly not through the storyline itself. I would, like, in my opinion, hybridity would possibly be established through the stylistics that are taken. It's more, I think this hybridity in this case occurs more through it's more unconscious than a very conscious attempt, because it seeps in different ways. Because the conscious effort, like you mentioned, was to maintain so-called authenticity. So yes, that would be my response to that.
Yeah, I think it's more of the techniques that he uses, which brings in the, am I audible? Yeah, which brings in the authenticity.
Yes.
Because it's the technique, because whatever they're hand drawing it. And when you hand draw it,
Yes.
thing, So some amount of Japaneseness does come into it. And also how it also is very interesting how actually
Yes.
they look at India. My interest would be like how they're actually perceiving a thing which is so typically Indian.
Yes.
Now, when a Japanese tries to redraw it, how they're actually looking at Indians. It is very interesting because if you look at some, I'm doing another kind of a thing. I'm looking at older paintings by the early Meiji travelers to India, and they all the Indians are black. I don't think we have that. I mean, it is because they have this colonial perception of dual of black and white, and they're looking there because they have to show the whites as white. So the Indians are all becoming too black. I mean, they're just black bodies. They're just, and also in the shadow. So it's also, which shows that then of course it comes back to the whole Homi Bhabha's concept of when he talks about location of culture, and he says that how is culture represented through translation and through interpretation. So that is what Homi Bhabha he calls about. Of course, he calls in post-colonial theories, but he says it is actually the representation of culture in translation and in repeated translations that you actually get a sense of how the cultural comes out. So it is also interesting. So in that context, of course, you can always relate it to this whole notion of hybridity over there. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm,
ma'am.
I'm very happy with this thing.
Thank
So
thank
anybody
you,
else?
Ranjana-san. Thank you so much for initiating such a, it's going to be, I can see, very lively and very useful discussion. Now I would like to invite comments or questions from the participants, all the participants.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, am I audible?
yes, you are audible. Can you please tell
Yes.
your name and introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, may I remain anonymous?
Acha, okay.
Ma'am, my question is from Visakha, ma'am. Ma'am, actually, I'm an anime artist, so I'm very much engaged in anime and drawing these mangas. And so my question was, ma'am, I've seen there's a huge market of anime and manga in India. And I meet people every day who are like while traveling in a metro, somebody is wearing anime t-shirts or somebody is watching anime on their headphones and mobile phones. So, but now I've heard Japanese people say that actually anime industry in Japan is actually dying. It is actually declining in Japan right now because so my question is this true? Because the youth population in Japan is actually declining and the population growth rates are also falling. So anime is the market is running out in Japan. So I want to ask that are these claims true and is it actually like that? And what are the and also my second question is what are the are there any upcoming projects like these Ramayana that you mentioned? Uh, are there any future projects also which are on which work is being done between Japan and India? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you for your question. While I cannot completely be sure of the sociological basis of the decline of, say, the anime industry in Japan, what I can say is that I am aware that our anime artists and anime productions in general are becoming more and more popular in countries, say outside of Japan, at least, because a lot like OTT platforms in general nowadays like to create their own anime and basically use that style to engage in narrative and storytelling and visual production. So I would say that it is like the industry continues to thrive through spreading out globally and transnationally. And in terms of upcoming projects, while I'm not like, I know that this film right now, the one that I spoke about, that was digitally remastered and released again in Japan and across the world in a 4K version. So it was basically done because it was considered worth preserving and worth basically it was considered as an important interconnection between India and Japan. So the thing is, since it was done so recently and there have been various cultural partnerships announced between India and Japan as well, I believe that upcoming projects are something that can be understood and can definitely take place. While I'm not certain of specific ones, it can definitely happen in the future.
Ma'am, I had a follow-up question also. May I?
Can you be brief, please, Mr.
Yes, ma'am.
Anonymous? Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm actually, I was planning to, I was considering becoming an anime artist and starting startups like Shonen Jump in India also. So, ma'am, I was concerned about it, ma'am. But there are rising amount of, actually the popularity of anime is rising in India, but not actually. A very small percentage of people are actually buying the stuff and actually contributing to the anime industry in Japan. There are just a lot of non-copyrighted and copied and fake mangas and anime, and there are illegal websites streaming animes and anime, and people are watching them, but they're not really putting any money into the anime industry. So I wanted to know, will it be?
Excuse me, I think
Yes, ma'am.
you
Yes.
can take later on the email ID or contact of
Okay, ma'am, sure, ma'am.
Visakha from the KIZUNA, this Mosai website, and we probably will finish. You please finish here and let Visakha respond to this.
Okay, ma'am.
Briefly,
So,
yeah.
will it be a right decision to ban illegal websites in India? I just wanted to ask. So, thank you, ma'am, for taking your time.
Yes, Shakha, would you like to respond to that, or it's just a comment?
I would probably prefer to respond to that later through a written
Ah,
communication or something of that sort. So,
yeah. Thank you.
May
Okay, Dr. Jain, yes.
From a technical point of view, I think you did mention the hybridity in terms of the generic technical aesthetics of anime. I think Visakha-san may like to explain how the airflow is shown through moving through fields, or the colors that the change. So I think it's the aesthetic culture of Japan that does get incorporated in otherwise, in terms of dress, in terms of story, in terms of which is embedded Indian culture. You may like to, when you write the paper, expand a bit more on the hybridity aspect, which comes through technique. Because whatever it is, the anime technique, which is very peculiarly Japanese. So the next question therefore would be that when there is a Hollywood version, then compared to this Indian so-called version, North Indian or whatever limited version, do you find any differences if you have had time to examine the Hollywood version more carefully? The other very simple question is, why is Hanuman shown not red face? Because Is this the South Asian kind of concept or?
Rama, the white complexion.
Sir, I could not really catch the last part of your sentence. Could you just like repeat the last sentence you just said?
The red face, instead of red face of Hanuman,
Mm-hmm.
it's the face, white face, which is also typical of South Asian representation of Hanuman, isn't it?
Yes.
Indian Ramayana, at least the North India, is always shown the red face of Hanuman.
Mhm.
Is that a
Yes.
Japanese kind of version, or which cultural context is that?
Indonesian also. Indonesian Ramayana also they
Yes.
show white.
White.
I think.
Okay, okay. Okay. Sir, I think that is definitely a part that I need to expand on and work more, because even I was thinking that this film has far more like nuance which needs to be talked about and expanded on, and I will definitely be working on that when I expand this paper, for sure.
Is it? Professor Jain, Sushma Jain, you're muted.
Muted. Sorry. I wanted to ask one small question. The other day when watching NHK TV, there was a discussion on anime and manga making. A technique called harmony was mentioned. I wonder if you are familiar with that, because it said that this is used for bringing expressions on characters' faces, expressions of fear, whatever, the emotions and feelings. What is it exactly, this technique, if you know that?
Ma'am, I'm not sure if I
Sure.
completely
Yeah,
I
no,
know this idea or technique. I
Yeah.
kind of know a little bit, because in terms only of Miyazaki Hayao work, but that too, it's not too clear. But I will definitely look into it, because I think it might actually help with this particular film.
Yes, because facial
So
expressions
I'll
on
do that too.
characters. And I believe I hear the
Yes.
Japanese anime is, can you hear me? It borrows from Indian mythology. For example, the concept of chakra and characters similar to bodhisattvas. Yes. And there is one female character made on Arjun and called Juna, I think, and Yema, etc., etc.
Yes.
So the earlier person that asked, also they are making on Mahabharata, an anime on Mahabharata, where of course the Krishna is shown blue, the dark blue, and the proper, as we see in Indian pictures and visuals. So.
May I? Sorry. About Professor Sushma Jain's harmony, I think you did mention Gaia in your. Yes?
I did, yes.
And I think
Yes,
basically that's the kind of the concept of harmony is built into that. Harmony between human nature and so on.
Okay.
Isn't it? So I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you did sort of point out, but the language was different. So yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, you still have time.
Then may I conclude? Why am I echoing? Muted. Okay, I'm not
Professor Jain,
unmuted.
you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think since there are no more questions, I would like to conclude by saying a few words. Just summarizing the lecture, Yuko Sago, as has been discussed so in detail, he conceived the film. He was very much impressed by this huge epic Ramayana because it had the deities and people and birds and animals and very futuristic gizmos like flying vehicles, weapons of mass destructions, etc., etc. But due to the sensitive nature of the content, as Visakha mentioned, not to disturb the socio-religious fabric of our culture, the producers had to, sorry, am I again? I can't hear, but I'm not muted.
No, you're audible. You're fine.
Okay, I thought, yeah. So, as Vishakha said, that they were underutilizing some anime genre features, such as this, what is it called? Zeitgeist. I think this means the ethos, the spirit of the time, Vishakha?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Zeitgeist, as in they're
Ah.
usually more overtly critical about a
Yeah,
lot of
very
themes.
critical,
They
yeah.
didn't do that in this.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And that is why one felt that the storyline was flat. But still, I think it has not lost the overall ethos of the epic. It is very well conveyed. And the message of peaceful coexistence of all living beings has also been conveyed. And we know that, now coming to the Indo-Japan relations, we all know that close and cordial cultural relations between two countries build trust and understanding and mutually beneficial relationships between nations. So anime and films, among others, can really hugely contribute in promoting closer and stronger cultural relations and mutual understanding between India and Japan. Anime adaptation of Ramayana is a perfect example of making cultural compromises, showing willingness and respect for foreign cultures, which is, required between, for good relationships between two cultures. And taking words from Visakha, and it's a pioneering effort within Indo-Japan cultural, technological, and informational exchange and hybridity, as Visakha has told us. India, I know this person, whoever was anonymous person, says it is on decline, but in India, anime is very popular. There is a huge population of young people who love Japanese animes. They are liked by young and old, not old, but adult youths alike, because their characters, somehow I feel in India, not many videos or films or novels are written particularly for teenagers. But in Japan, these anime are oriented towards teenage people. And since these characters have their own strong and weak points, like we normally, all young people have, so they are, these anime make them very relatable. And that is why probably one reason that why they are, besides, of course, the dramatic effects and graphics, etc., they're very relatable. I would like to say that long ago, when I used to teach Japanese, there was a chapter on reading versus manga, visual versus words. And where it said that if you only have visuals, then you sort of dull your, make your imagination power dull. You don't use any imagination. You see, when you are reading, you cannot see pictures, how the wind is blowing, what the color of the nature is, how things, where things are placed. So you use your imagination, which even now, the other day I was seeing a video from a recent film in which one of the main characters said that we are overloaded with visuals. We should stop seeing these visuals and start reading, emphasize more on reading books, so that, you know, it stimulates our imagination power, our thought process, etc. But anyway, this is not the subject of our discussion today, so I will not go in further into this. I once again, I again once thank Visakha and Professor Ranjana Sensei very much for this wonderful presentation and discussion after that. I will conclude with a very warm applause to both speakers and participants. Thank you very much. Well, I will not say bye-bye. Matai Masho.
On behalf of Mosai,
Arigatou gozaimasu.
on behalf of Sushila Narasimhan, I thank Professor Sushama Jain, Professor Ranjana Mukhopadhyaya, Visakha Chowdhury, and so many distinguished people who have taken time out to listen to the discussion and the lecture. I can see the Japan Foundation, Ouji Sensei himself has listened to it, and I'm sure with him we will do some follow-up on this very interesting presentation, especially using anime as a vehicle for Indo-Japanese cultural interaction. Incidentally, recently we had a Japanese language speech contest where the younger people were speaking from their heart in Japanese language what they thought of. Several of the speakers spoke about manga and anime. So I think it is definitely very close to the heart of the Indian, especially the youth. And therefore, Sato Sensei, I think it will be good to build on this further. And I think Visakha ji needs a special vote of thanks from all of us for sort of putting this on our discussion table. Thank you so much. Thank you all. We are delighted to have you. And incidentally, there is an interesting publication by Mukhopadhyaya brought out based on 2018 international conference, which is available on the net, freely accessible. There are some 18 beautifully written and illustrated articles in it. I would very much like all the people who are participating to have a look at it. And also, we greatly appreciate feedback on what other topics and the younger people, especially doing research, PhD, and so on, please bring this forum to their notice. We'll be delighted to put them on our monthly list. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jain. I would like to
Thank you so much.
Dr. Jain, Mosai, and KIZUNA for creating this forum for such good, useful, intellectual, scholarly discussions to promote Indo-Japan relations. Thank you, Dr. Jain, Mosai, and KIZUNA. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Evening,
Thank you very
whatever.
much.
And good luck,
Thank
Visakha,
you.
with your research.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ranjana. Thank you.